Hello, BookTube. I've got some mail for you today. Just a bit of mail on a gorgeous Saturday. Warm, but gorgeous. We've got a few packages here, and I thought I'd try to remind myself to do an aspect of this that a lot of you liked and wanted me to continue, which is that in addition to everything else, in addition to showing you the book and talking about it and whatnot, that I would also look at it a little from a critical point of view. Uh, Obviously not a critical appraisal, since I in most cases haven't read the book, but critical in the sense of a longtime experienced freelance reviewer and also a newspaper book section editor. So estimating the odds of these things and the interest of these things and whatnot. I'll try to remember to do that. Let's see what this first one is. It's a finished copy of something. What have we got here? Okay. All right. This is a finished copy due in early September. It looks like a work of fiction. Or no, nonfiction. This is by Robert Hutton. That name sounds awful familiar to me. And this is called The Illusionist. The true story of the man who fooled Hitler. Let's see here. Oh, Kirkus Reviews calls it rollicking. We're not allowed to use that word. The astonishing World War II episode of how Colonel Dudley Clark thwarted the Nazis in Egypt in 1942 while inventing a whole new playbook of military deception. Pretty neat cover. Cairo, 1942. If you had asked a British officer who Colonel Clark was, they would have been able to point him out. Always ready with a drink and a story, Clark was a well-known figure in Cairo social circles and nightlife. If you then asked what he did, you would have had less success. Those who knew didn't tell, and almost no one really knew at all. Clark thought of himself as developing a new kind of weapon. Its components: rumor, stagecraft, a sense of fun. Its target: the mind of Erwin Rommel, Hitler's greatest general. Hitler's greatest general in Africa, let's point out. Throughout history, military commanders have sought to mislead their opponents. Dudley Clark set out to do it on a scale no one had imagined before. Even afterwards, almost no one understood the magnitude of his achievement. Drawing on recently released documents and hugely expanding on the louche portrait of Clark as seen in SAS Rogue Warriors, journalist-historian Robert Hutton reveals the amazing story of Clark's A-Force, the invention of the SAS and commandos, and the masterful hoodwinking of the Desert Fox at the Battle of El Alamein. Okay. All right, fine. Why do I know this author, though? Robert Hutton. The author of Agent Jack, the true story of MI5's secret Nazi hunter. I'm not sure that I know that book. Do I know that book? Okay, well, it isn't coming to me, but that's all right. This is World War II. And groundbreaking World War II history, because it's a lot of it is taken. A lot of this story, it sounds like, has not been told before. Fantastic. So we're off to a fine start. The Illusionist. Oh wait, I was going to talk about the reviewing criteria, right? Well, this is due in early September, and it is now August 10th. So, and I don't believe I ever got the advance copy of this thing. So, in practical terms, there isn't a chance. In the normal world of book reviewing, there isn't a chance because your plans for 3 weeks from now would already be set. The idea that if you were a book section editor and you got a finished copy of this and you didn't have the advanced copy, had no idea that it was coming, there's no chance at all that you could vet it, maybe test out a little of it yourself to see whether or not you like how it's done and that you think it's important enough to cover, and then send it out to a freelancer and have them read it and return a review in that little time. There's no way that you could do it. I guess if you got the advanced copy of this back in July, well, then you could have been planning, but even then you'd be facing obstacles because this is a small story. So looking at September coverage, September is probably going to have much bigger World War II books than this. Broader sweeps, one-volume histories, Hitler biographies, things like that. And if you're a book section editor, you're going to be chary of hitting too many books on the same subject, even as popular a subject as World War II. So you might look at this and say, well, we haven't had a book on World War II in a few months, but I wonder if this isn't too specialized. One guy that nobody's ever heard of? You might think that way. So in that case, it would be long odds. In my case, not so much. In my case, not so much. Maybe for my Georgia newspaper, yes. But I'm also an editor at Open Letters Review, which is an online journal, and where that's not so much of a concern. I could easily review this myself for Open Letters. So, but in the normal course of the world, the professional book reviewing world, getting a finished copy cold like this on August 10th for a September 3rd book would put it out of the running. Interesting as it is, unfortunately. So let's see what this next one is. Oh, great. Oh, fantastic. This is by Gene Strauss, and this is Family Romance, John Singer Sargent and the Wertheimers. Fantastic. A lot of you will know that painting, or maybe you won't. Maybe nobody will. Maybe nobody's familiar with John Singer Sargent, my favorite painter. So this comes out in late November, long time from now. So plenty of time to get this assigned to a freelancer. Plenty of time. Especially if in your mental Rolodex of freelancers, you've got somebody who's really good on art. So let's see here. Okay, this comes with blurbs from Stacy Schiff, Judith Thurman, and Hermione Lee. Long, loving blurbs from 3 great writers. Now, that's amazing right there. Let's see here. Family Romance begins with a mystery. When Gene Strauss first encountered the Wertheimer name in the Seattle Art Museum 23 years ago, it was at an exhibition called John Singer Sargent Portraits of the Wertheimer Family. The exhibition consisted of 12 portraits of the Wertheimer parents and their 10 children, painted by Sargent over 10 years between 1898 and 1908. Strauss had a million questions, beginning with who were these people and how did they become so intertwined with Sargent? After a 10-year break, during which Strauss continued to think about the Wertheimers, she began her research for answers. Following the few clues she could find, they turned out to be key to unlocking the stories behind the portraits and the Wertheimers and Sargent and their worlds. The patriarch of the family, Asher, was an eminent London art dealer of German Jewish descent, whom Strauss discovered became Sargent's greatest private patron and close friend. As she explored the family history, from Asher's ancestors through the lives of his 10 children, she found that each member of the family had a story, and their stories, told together with Sargent's, painted a rich and complex portrait of their world around the turn of the century. Wow. Okay. I've had a million editions of Sargent's portraits, the greatest portrait painter in the history of the world, in my opinion. I've had a million editions of them, including the multi-volume one that I think Yale put out 10 years ago. And all of those things came with huge amounts of text about these sitters. But it sounds like this is going to get me even more. It sounds like this is going to be a work of historical investigation. How interesting. Okay, gathering together information that until now has remained either unknown or dispersed. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. Well, I'm all on board for this. All on board for this. Fantastic. I ordinarily, if I got a book like this, what's the date on this thing? If I got a book like this, November art release, I would be beating the bushes for an art person to review it. But I don't need to in this case because this is John Singer Sargent. I will certainly write about this myself. So fantastic, great. Alrighty, and in terms of the broader book reviewing world, well, anything's possible if it's late November. We're in early August, so anything is possible now. That's the perfect envelope that you want there, so that a book section editor is going to look at this and know right away. It's not a biography of Sargent, and it's not a big museum catalog retrospective of his work, and those two things work against it. Because it's not general interest. At least it's not going to appear general interest. Instead, it looks like a very specific investigation of a very specific sliver of a larger subject, just like this. So an editor might look at this and say, well, I really like Sargent, but there's a big Rembrandt biography coming out right around the same time, and I don't want to write about art. Why not the Art News Daily? I don't want to write about art all the time, and this seems a little specific. An editor might make that decision. So you never know. This far enough ahead of time so that they might not. So let's see. Let's see what this next one is. Finished copy. Oh, good. Okay, great. This comes out in early September. This is a finished copy that comes out in early September. This is by Peter Godfrey Smith, who wrote a fascinating book called Other Minds about non-human intelligence. I liked Other Minds quite a bit. I was a little disappointed in that it, like so many other books about non-human cognition, ended up being about human cognition, but I would still take it. It was still a good, big step in the right direction. And this is the new book. This is Living on Earth, Forest, Corals, Consciousness, and the Making of the World. Lovely cover there. So what have we got here? Another positive review from Kirkus Reviews. A positive blurb from Sean Carroll. Great. Let's see here. Peter Godfrey Smith is known to readers as the intrepid scuba diving philosopher behind acclaimed Other Minds and Metazoa. Metazoa really didn't work for me, but Other Minds is a classic. Books that turned to the minds of octopuses and then of animals more broadly to explore the riddle of how consciousness came to exist. When we think about the history of life on Earth, we're often thinking about that question, about evolutionary process that brought us and our fellow creatures into being. But what would happen if we flipped the script? If we approached organisms not just as evolutionary products, but as active causes of the transformation of our planet? What does the history of life on Earth look like when we put living things in the driver's seat? This is a story, audacious, teeming with observations and insight, and of course action-packed, that Living on Earth seeks to tell, following the course of life on Earth from animal matter's first appearance all the way to its future extinction. The author shows us how the actions of living creatures have profoundly shaped their environments across time, first in the sea and then later on land. This means returning to the underwater world of octopus dens and coral reefs, but also venturing into forests, where we encounter massive mountain gorillas in Rwanda, marvel at the bowerbirds, masters of display, in Australia, and watch as a collection of parrots, honey-eaters, kookaburras, and magpies soar and skirmish in Godfrey Smith's own backyard. Australian wildlife. I will never see it. It's the only wildlife that I will never see. Living on Earth is a capstone work for Peter Godfrey Smith, a panoramic picture of our planet that is gloriously ever-changing because of what living beings, cyanobacteria, gorillas, bowerbirds, and now, crucially, humans, do. Okay, great. It has bullet points. I wonder if I'll know any of the bullet points. I wonder if I'll know them ahead of time. Bullet points are always a help if you want to interview the author. For some people, I would love to interview this author, and I wouldn't use bullet points in a million years. But let's see if I know any of the facts. Fact number 1, more than half of all the wild animals on Earth, excluding city-dwelling rodents, appear to be bats. Yes, I did know that. I did know that. Oh, okay, great. Pairs of fish build towers of shells that use the physics of water to provide oxygen to underground tunnels sheltering their eggs. Did not know that. Do the fish know that? A coral reef's color provides sunscreen to the symbiotic organisms living inside its corals. Did not know that. When lyrebirds imitate the calls of other birds, they can fool the species being imitated. Now, that I knew. There's actually visual footage of that. Two people often partially synchronize their brain waves when cooperating on a task. Never happened with me and Deb, obviously. Livestock make up about 10 times the biomass of wild animals and birds. Yeah, all of our meat slaves. They're endless in their number, and their suffering is also endless. We recognize emotions in others more readily when they are expressed on the left side of the face than on the right. That sounds like a TED Talk factoid. I don't really believe that. You have to get wary. In the 21st century, you have to be wary of TED Talk factoids. I would want proof of that, and I don't think I would believe the proof. But the rest of them were great. The rest of those bullet points were great. Okay, fantastic. And look, this has illustrations all throughout as well. I think it has an island of illustrations. Yeah, it does. It has an island of full color illustrations, but also illustrations all throughout. Oh my God, there's a mountain gorilla. God help us. You could pop your head off like a pimple if they wanted to. They don't usually want to, but they could. And then this final book here, and then we'll be done with Saturday mail. Don't know that I'm going to get any mail on Sunday. But let's see what this final thing is. Of course, this the same thing applies here as applies to this one. If you're getting the finished copy, if you're a book section editor and you're getting the finished copy now, then you're out of luck because you've already planned your month ahead of time. When did we say this thing came out? Yeah, the first week of September, the first Tuesday in September. So if you're a book section editor and you're just getting this, then you're out of luck. It's not going to get reviewed in your section. But if you're not, if you're anybody else, right? Or if you maybe want to review it late, a book section editor could get this finished copy and think, well, I didn't have an advanced copy of this, but I like the sound of it, and I've got a person who's really good on nature and the natural sciences, so I'll just assign it. And they'll do it to me they'll give it to me when they can. I don't need to do it on the week of publication. Maybe my review runs in October. No big deal. Plenty of journals do that. The London Review of Books is famous for doing that. So, but if you're worried about exact timeliness, well, then you're out of luck now unless you got the advanced copy. But everybody else can review it whenever they like. It sounds fascinating. And then we'll do this last one here. Oh, God. Oh, my God. Okay. All right. Well, points for persistence. We've got another one of these things. Let's see what we have here. So this comes out. Oh, this comes out in January. This is from Princeton University Press. This doesn't come out until next year. And this is by Raul Rojas, and it's translated by Eduardo Aparicio. And this is The Language of Mathematics, the stories behind the symbols. So it's a math book. I routinely get math books, even though I am math inept, just completely math inept. This is promised to be a marvelous compendium of mathematical symbols and their fascinating histories. So it's not a math book, really. It's more orthography. Well, it looks like there's plenty of math in here, but it looks like it's about where did we get the symbol for Z or infinity. Galileo famously wrote that the book of nature is written in mathematical language. Yeah. The Language of Mathematics is a wide-ranging, beautifully illustrated collection of short, colorful histories of the most commonly used symbols in mathematics, providing readers with an engaging introduction to the origins, evolution, and conceptual meaning of each one. In dozens of lively and informative entries, the author shows how today's mathematics stand on the shoulders of giants, mathematicians from around the world who developed mathematical notation through centuries of collective effort. And he tells the story of a lot of those people, huge number of people. Topics range from numbers and variables to sets and functions, constants and combinatorics. Wasn't that the dragon in Dragon Slayer? Combinatorics. Rojas describes the mathematical problems associated with different symbols and reveals how mathematical notation has sometimes been an accidental process. Okay. Well, I don't need to think about this, thankfully. Not that I would devote much time to thinking about it, but I don't need to think about this because it's next year. So it's outside of my ken completely. I guess if you were like a section editor at the Washington Post or whatever, you might consider this. If it were you'd have to dip into it a little. You probably have to take it home with you and dip into it a little. If it ranges a little further afield than just the symbols, to maybe also reflect on the development of math, then you might consider it, especially if you've got a math wonk in your mental Rolodex, then you might consider it. It might be worth it. But if it's just the symbols, if it's just how did we get the symbol for fractions, you might not do it, because who's going to want to know that other than math wonks? And what percentage of the readership do they make up? You might be a little bit standoffish about such a thing. I don't know. You'd have a long time to think about it. No one is planning for January. No one. No editor is planning for January. So you'd have a long time to think about it. But anyway, there you go. That's the mail. Not a bad mail haul. We have, did we get any fiction? No, we did not. Even better. We have The Language of Mathematics, how the symbols develop. We have Living on Earth. Not only deep time history, a delve into, the ancient epochs of history of cyanobacteria on Earth, but also of how they changed the planet. In terms of coral, of course, shaping the planet, in terms of releasing oxygen as a byproduct to increase the oxygen quotient of the atmosphere, and all the stuff that made possible. And we have a John Singer Sargent book on his connections with the Wertheimer family and how deep they go and what they were. Fascinating. And we have The Illusionist, the man who fooled Hitler, about one soldier in the African theater. So we have two books that are out right away, two finished copies that are out right away, and two books that have a little bit more lead time, including the math book, which has a long lead time. So very interesting. Fantastic. I'll take it as mail for a sleepy weekend. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.